Hey everyone, I'm Jason Odell, and nice to be here again. It's been a while since I've had a video, so hope everyone's doing great. So what do I got today? Well, it's kind of fun. I recently was able to get my hands on the new Nikon 24 to 200 f4 to 6.3 Z mount lens. So this is for the Nikon Z mirrorless system, the Z6 and the Z7 full frame cameras, although you could use this on a Z50 DXZ system camera. It would give you a different angle of view, of course. So I wanted to show the lens, compare it to some other things, talk about my testing with it, give some examples, show you why I like it, what's good about it, why you might be interested in this lens. So here it is. This is the 24 to 200. It includes front and rear caps, and it also includes a reversible bayonet mount lens hood that you can attach to it. Nothing really spectacular. It's got the multi-function focus ring towards the front, towards the user, and then the zoom ring here, which is locks. It has a little lock switch here on the side. You can probably see that. I unlock it. And if I unlock this, it zooms out. Okay, so there we go. It gets kind of long, but reality is that this is a pretty small lens. I mean, you can see it fits in my hand. It uses a 67 millimeter front filter thread, so not very large. You make sure you got, if you do use filters, that's the size that you'll want. And I want to just compare it to some other lenses that you may be thinking about. So the obvious comparison, the first one, is the 24 to 70 f4. This is the kit lens, of course, that you can buy as a kit with the Nikon Z system. And as what you can see is that they're really not all that different. In fact, if we take the 24 to 70 and set it to its normal usable position, so set it to 24 so it's not collapsed, these two lenses are almost the same size. I mean, look at that. Very easy to use, very easy to hand hold. But if you're looking, if you're in the market for this 24 to 200, why would that be? Well, the whole reason for this lens, something like this, is to be an all-purpose walk-around zoom lens, right? You don't want to be changing lenses. Maybe you're on a vacation, and this gives you a tremendous range. I love 24 on the wide end. I've used different lenses in the F mount, so I thought I would do some comparisons with these two lenses. The other lens that I was mostly using as my go-to walk around or travel lens, and this is when I was shooting with F mount, was the 24 to 120 f4. So I did some comparisons. I've also in the past I've used the 28 to 300 F mount lens. I no longer have that lens. I found it to be pretty heavy and bulky, and I like having 24 on the wide end. So anyway, let's go and take a look at some comparisons now that I've done so that we can really see how this 24 to 200 does in terms of performance in the real world.
Here's the specs of the new Nikon Z 24 to 200 f4 to 6.3. Just going to look over these really quickly. What you can see is that this is a variable aperture design. So at the wide end, you'll have f4, and as you zoom out, you will, or zoom in, I should say, to longer focal lengths, the aperture will quickly shift all the way out to f6.3. So at 200 millimeters, you're at f6.3. This is done intentionally to keep the size and weight of the lens down, as well as the cost. It is a full frame lens, so it has full frame 35 millimeter format on Nikon Z cameras. And it focuses fairly close. You can get down to a little over 1.5 feet or 50 centimeters, so that's not too bad. It's not a macro lens. Magnification is not quite 0.3, but it's not too bad. You can use it for portraits. You can use it for a lot of different subjects, and that's really important, especially on the wide end where you want to get close to a subject when you're shooting wide. So this is a decent close focus distance for that. It's a fairly complex optical design, 19 elements, 15 groups. Unlike some of the fancier lenses, this lens has 7 rounded diaphragm blades. Some of the newer, fancier, more expensive lenses will have 9 blades. I've found the bokeh isn't too bad though, all things considered. It does include built-in image stabilization, that's VR, and that works in synchrony with the Nikon Z6 and Z7's in body stabilization, and I believe you get 5 axes worth of stabilization with this lens. As I mentioned, it takes 67 millimeter front filters. But what I really like is that this lens is only 1.25 pounds, 570 grams. That's not a heavy lens. And if you want an everyday walk around travel lens, size and weight are really, really important factors. Now what I want to do is set up a comparison with this lens against the f-mount lenses that you may have or have been considering that were all around, walk around all-in-one zooms. And these are the 28 to 300, 3.5 to 5.6 VR Nikkor lens, and the one that I mostly use, the 24 to 120 f4. Both of these lenses are, all of these lenses are similarly priced, although you can see the Z is a little bit less expensive than either of the f-mount options. When we go down to the specs, let's really take a look at, they have similar magnifications. The two f-mount lenses do have 9 aperture blades, but they both are bigger. They use 77 millimeter front filters instead of 67. And when you start looking at the weight and the dimensions, look how much heavier the 28 to 300 and the 24 to 120 are compared to our 24 to 200 Z mount lens. In some cases, it's almost a half a pound heavier. This makes a tremendous difference in the way that this lens is going to feel. Moreover, look at the design when we compare these lenses. The 24 to 120 in particular has a very large barrel design. It's got the zoom ring kind of farther out. The way that these lenses handle is a little bit more cumbersome than what I've found handling with the 24 to 200. It just seems to handle really nicely, fits in the hand, and moreover, I should point out, this is a native lens. You don't need to use the FTZ mount adapter like you would with these other lenses. So not only do you have to consider the weight of these lenses, but you have to add in the size and the weight of packing an FTZ adapter to use the f-mount lenses on your Z-mount body. So I think what we can see, like on paper, these are all very good lenses, but the 24 to 200 is really smaller, and that's intentional. So let's now take a look at how I did some test shots with the 24 to 200. Okay, the first thing I want to do is I want to look at some images that I captured with this new 24 to 200, and I've captured them in a variety of focal lengths, 24, 50, 120, 200. So let's start at the wide end, and let's go in here and take a look at this sequence. We'll start at the 24 millimeter, and what you can see is at the widest, so this is wide open, we get a little bit of light fall off in the corners. That is going to disappear, as you can see, as we move to f5.6. That darkening in the corners is disappearing, and part of that is because I've set the camera in my Nikon Z7 to use standard amount of vignette removal. You can actually increase this, but it's no big deal. You can get rid of it in your RAW processor like Lightroom here. So here's f8, and here's f11 and f16. So you can see that it's pretty clean across the frame. Let's take a look at sharpness wide open. So let's zoom into the image here. And I'm going to go in, and I'm just going to make this even bigger. I'm going to go to 2 to 1 so you can really see this. So here's center of the frame, not too bad. And we'll go out to the edges of the frame. And I'm focused on this really boring fence here because I get a nice clean view across the frame. And you can see that as we get out to the extreme edges of the frame, so we're out here, the sharpness does fall off, as you might expect for a lens like this wide open. And if we go out and we start to stop down, we'll look at this performance wide open as we stop down. So here's 5.6, and here is f8. It gets a little bit better. So there's 5.6. You can see the sharpness. Here's f8, a little bit better, and f11. We're in the center here. Let's go back over here. f11, not too bad. This again, I would expect the performance of a lens like this to be the lowest performance, kind of at the widest end or the longest end. So the fact that this is falling off like that, it's not a big deal, because for the most part, this kind of image is going to be perfectly fine when you print it at a normal size. So it's not going to rival my 14 to 20 or 14 to 30 S Nikkor lens, or maybe a 24 or 20 millimeter prime, but it's not bad. And if we go back and now we look at some of the other focal lengths, here's 50 millimeters. You can see here's the center. This is wide open. Now here we're at f5.6 because the lens, again, is variable aperture. So not bad in the center, and pretty good. It starts to get a little bit soft, but we're way out at the corners now. That's not too bad. And if you think about shooting with a 50 millimeter focal length, you're probably not worrying if it's like a portrait or something. The corners aren't going to matter too much, but that's a little bit of fall off here, very edges of the frame, and that's going to go away probably as we stop down. So here's f8. Let's take a look at f8. Here's f11. Here's f8. So f8, not too bad really. f11, it's pretty good. So if you are stopping this lens down, you're going to get better performance. We can take it up to, let's just go straight up to 200. So here is the lens in its maximum zoom. So this is the far end, and this is also where you might expect performance to drop off a little bit. So we'll take a look here. So here's the center of the frame. Pretty sharp, not bad. The bokeh is not too bad either, if you look at that. It's not a cream machine, but it's not bad. And let's look at the edges of the frame. Again, this is wide open. Now we're at f6.3. So you can see it's not bad. There's a little bit of softness in the very edge of the frame, but for the most part, you're not noticing that. And let's take it and see what happens if we stop down. So if we're at f11, it's pretty well sharp. Okay, so not bad at all. In fact, I was pleasantly impressed with the way this lens performs. So what I'm seeing just looking at this is I don't see anything in my lens that jumps out at me and says, oh my gosh, this lens gets really sloppy in the corners or any really disturbing characteristics. But I did want to see how it would compare against the 24 to 120. So let's go back and look at this against the 24 to 120. I'm going to pull up 24 millimeters and we'll compare them wide open. So on the right is the 24 to 120, and on the left is the 24 to 200. And you can see there's a little bit difference in rendering in the corner shading of the frame. These are both wide open. Remember, the corner shading you can adjust in your raw processor to get rid of some of that corner fall off. Now let's zoom in on these images and take a look at both of them at the center and in the edges as these refresh. In the center, they're both pretty good. There might be a tiny edge to the 24 to 200, but it's really negligible here, and it could just be slight differences in focusing. So let's look now at the edges of the frame and see what we get. Now here again we have the 24 to 200 on the left, and the 24 to 120, which is a constant aperture lens, on the right. And what you can see is both of these lenses get softer in the corner, and if anything, the 24 to 120 seems to be better. And mind you, this is wide open. If we go back out and now compare them at, say, f5.6 and do the same comparison, let's look at that same comparison. Again, now this time let me switch these back around. Okay, so I put the 24 to 120 over here on the right, and the 24 to 200 is over on the left. And again, very, very little difference at this point. Maybe a little bit better stop down with the 24 to 120. But again, nothing that is so drastic that really matters. By the time you get to f8, these problems, or I shouldn't say problems, but these differences go away. So here's f8, and let's zoom out. So here's the center of the frame. 24 to 200 on the left, 24 to 120 on the right. Pretty comparable. As we go across to the edge of the image, again, we're at f8. Both are absolutely reasonable. Now, that's the wide end. Let's look at a different focal length. Let's take the long end. So I did both of these lenses at 120, and we'll do wide open. So for wide open, we have to choose f4 and f6.3 because one is a variable aperture lens and one is not. So let's zoom out. Okay. So here's our test shot compared. I have the 24 to 120 on the right, the 24 to 200 on the left. Zooming into the center of the frame. Not a lot of difference there. Mind you, again, these are wide open. And if we look at the edges of the frame, now you can see, I think pretty clearly, that at the long end, the 24 to 200, mind you, this is the middle of its range, it's definitely better than my 24 to 120 when I'm at the long end of its range. So clearly here, we've got some nice improvements with the newer design that suggests to me that my 24 to 120, which I used all the time, is matched or in some cases even exceeded by this new 24 to 200. The 24 to 200 just does very well, and moreover, it goes to 200. So when I'm out in the field and it's one less need for me to change lenses to something longer. I can leave my 70 to 200 lens at home and just take the 24 to 200. I want to show you a quick comparison of the autofocus performance between the 24 to 200 and the 24 to 120. I did this in a couple of ways, but the way I tested this was basically to just capture some video with my Nikon Z camera. And so the worst case focusing scenario that I have found is when you go from minimum focus distance to whatever you're focusing on. That takes the longest. The best performance is when you start at infinity. And I tested it both ways. So I'm going to show you the infinity test because this is kind of the best case scenario. I'm just going to play this from these markers, starting from out of focus at infinity and going forward to in focus. So I'll start with the 24 to 120 so you can watch this in real time. And it is not so bad. That focuses pretty quickly. Now let's go over here to the 24 to 200, the new lens, and see how fast it focuses. Watch this. Bam! It's almost instantaneous. And on the slower end, starting from minimum, we have the 24 to 120, which is kind of our worst case scenario. I'll play that for you here, starting now. Okay, you can see how long that takes. And here's the 24 to 200. Much, much faster. So I think from this really non-scientific examination of the focus, you see that the 24 to 200, at least in decent conditions, is going to focus much faster than the f-mount lens. Moreover, I should point out that the 24 to 200 focusing motor is nearly silent. So if you are considering video, that's the one that's going to work better than one of these other all-in-one zooms. So it does make a difference. You won't hear the focus motor nearly as much.
Well, there you have it. I think you can see from my examples that I used that I really like this lens a lot. It performs optically as well or better than the 24 to 120 f4 that I've consistently used on my workshops, my travel, photo safaris with clients. If you like that lens, if you like the performance you got from a 24 to 120 or 28 to 300, this 24 to 200 lens is really outstanding. You do give up a little bit of aperture on the long end, but with the VR stabilization system that's in body with the Nikon Z6 and Z7 cameras, that's not a problem. You can handhold this very easily. It focuses quickly. It's a great lens. It costs about $900 in the US. You can check it out. And be sure to follow me on Facebook and on my website, luminescentphoto.com. Until next time, I'm Jason Odell, and I'll see you.